Okay, let's talk about the situationship. When the relationship was actually a situationship and it was never defined. Okay. I love helping women come from the situationship because we think it's unique. And there's this added layer of this shouldn't hurt so bad because it was never a defined relationship. But what I find is the opposite. I just continuously find that no matter how long the relationship was, no matter if you were married, no matter if you were coming from a breakup or a divorce, a 7-year relationship, a 3-month relationship, a 30-year relationship, oddly, it is kind of interesting. The solution is always the same. There are definitely nuances, right? Like if you were the person who left, you feel maybe an added layer of regret or guilt. If you're coming from a marriage, you are having to like rewire your whole identity. Sometimes you've been married your whole life. You don't even know who you are without that other person. But when you're coming from a situationship, what I find so fascinating is just like the shoulding. This shouldn't hurt as bad as it is. I shouldn't be as attached as I am. But I do want to reassure you that the solution's still the same. The solution still is we need to think, feel, and act like the version of you who's over this situationship. You also, secondly, need to look at what you're making the breakup of this situationship or the lack of a breakup, right? Because maybe he ghosted you and you just never heard from him again. That's super frustrating. What you're making the ghosting mean about you and your future and your life. And then lastly, reducing desire and attachment. There is some form of attachment that was created, totally fine, and it's probably all made up in your head. And I think that's one of the things that's so crazy about attachment is sometimes we've built up all this attachment around a fake idea. Like we don't even know the actual reality of the situation. We don't even know who that actual person is. I remember my ex, um, who I was with after my big breakup. We both had different ideas as to what our future was about, and we were both attached to those ideas. He thought that I would become a wedding photographer and be behind the camera taking photos with him, and we would do that business together. My idea, all made up in my head, just like his was all made up in his head, was we were going to travel the world together, and he was going to take beautiful, epic photos of me in these exotic places, looking bomb, fire as fuck. And it wasn't until we both said those out loud one day, and I remember he went first. He was like, well, aren't we going to do this? And I was like, where did you get that from? I thought we were doing this. And he's like, where did you get that from? We never actually had that conversation. We both built up a lot of attachment around each other because of that made up future, right? And so if you're going through a situationship, I just want to offer to you that perhaps we have some ideas about this person that might not even necessarily be true, and we don't even know they're not true. Um, and so we still need to reduce desire and attachment. Now, to do any of those three things, my friends, we have to release and let go of the shoulding we're doing on ourselves. We're shoulding all over ourselves. You got to stop. You got to stop telling yourself that it should have gone different, that he should have texted you back, that it should have lasted longer, or you should have seen the red flags and done something different, that it shouldn't hurt so bad. You need to release all of that, let go of all of it. And I'm like, just have a zero tolerance policy. I say this all the time about berating yourself and being negative and having negative self-talk of just it's a zero tolerance policy. And this year, 2026 specifically, I have given myself a zero tolerance policy of complaining. However, I just realized that I forgot for the last 2 months of April and May. So it's mid-May that I'm recording these. So I have recommitted to that. I have a zero tolerance policy around complaining. And I would offer to you to have a zero tolerance policy around shoulding. Because if you continue to should the situation and yourself, you won't get to the root of everything that we just talked about, those three areas. And so instead of focusing on what should or shouldn't be, I want to offer to you to explore those 3 areas of who is the version of me who's over this situationship? How does she think, feel, act? What am I making the ghosting or this mean about myself and my future? Change that story if it's not serving you. And lastly, reducing desire and attachment. Now, if you want to do that stuff with me, because it's way more fun with me, I can promise you, you should join me in the Get Over Your Ex program, which is open for enrollment until Sunday, June 14th, which is actually my husband's birthday. So that's fun. And you can sign up at www.dorothyabjohnson.com/get-over-my-ex. And I feel like I have the perfect example of doing this with my client, Miranda. I love Miranda. You guys have heard her, seen her. If you've been on the podcast or heard, listened, you probably maybe know of her name. Okay. Miranda came from a situationship and she was mired over this situationship. We really had to get clear about who was the version of her that was over her ex. We had to get clear about what she was making it mean about herself and what the ending meant about herself and about her future. And then lastly was reducing desire and attachment. And what was so cool is now we've continued working together, and I love that we continued working together. I've seen all seasons of her life, and she went through a season of dating, and and it's so good that I got to witness it all. She met her husband, got engaged, got married, all within a year. And now that she's married, living her married life, and we're continuing to work together on a couple of other nuanced things, it's just so funny, the brain and how it always wants what it doesn't have. And yeah, it's probably a side note story, totally different time. But I think she's a beautiful example of what's possible, of just because a situationship doesn't go the right way, or maybe even multiple situationships, doesn't mean that you're not going to end up engaged, married, doing life in the way that you want to. All right. I love you, my friends, and I will talk to you next time.